Hi everyone, it's Michael from the Georgia Poison Center. I'm so excited to introduce you to this cute new friend I met in the woods today. Isn't it adorable? This is a morel mushroom. In fact, it's an unusually large one. Can you believe this is as big as a soda can? Most morels, at least the ones I found locally, are much smaller than this. They're considered one of the first signs of spring and are considered choice edible mushrooms, meaning that not only can you eat them, but they're damn delicious too. Well, unfortunately, this one is a bit old and past its prime, not really fit for eating anymore. In Appalachia, some people call them morels or mollymoochers. In places like West Virginia, I believe in parts of Kentucky, they're known as hickory chicken for some reason. I've also heard the name dry land fish, probably because they look like fish if you cut them lengthwise. Anyway, regardless of what you call them, mushroom foragers get excited every year in early spring, hoping for a good harvest. But most people keep their favorite hunting spots, the so-called honey holes, as closely guarded secrets. It is considered bad manners to ask someone to disclose their morel locations, not that they tell you anyway. There are many different species of morel mushrooms in the genus Morchella. The exact classification of some species is still hotly debated among mycologists, the scientists who study fungi. For mushroom hunters' purposes, though, people typically talk in more general layman's terms about the yellow versus black morels. Morel mushrooms grow on the ground out of the soil and not on wood. They can often be found under hardwood deciduous trees such as tulip poplars. So these are some tulip poplar flowers, ash trees, and elm trees as well. You might also try looking near the banks of creeks where the soil is loamy and consistently moist but not soggy. Morels can be challenging to spot as their color and shape blend in well with their surroundings, especially when they're smaller. Morels also tend to like alkaline soil with high pH, such as locations with naturally occurring limestone deposits. Old abandoned apple orchards are known for producing morels, although some areas may have been previously sprayed with chemicals like lead arsenate, which contains lead and arsenic. These are toxic metals that don't disintegrate over time and can accumulate in mushrooms. Morels can also pop up after forest fires in some areas, especially in parts of the western United States, but we don't get these so-called burn morels here in Georgia. If you're out in the woods looking for morel mushrooms, it's important to know what you're looking for. Their caps are somewhat cone-shaped and can be cream-colored or yellowish, brown, or gray, sitting on a whitish, hollow stalk. You can see the texture of the cap is like a honeycomb pattern with a network of ridges and little pits. For most species, the base of the cap, the very bottom, is attached to the stem, except for the half-free morel, Morchella semilibera, which is attached to the stem about halfway up the cap. There are some related species of mushrooms in the genus Verpa that can look quite similar to morels. A key difference with Verpas is that their caps are attached at the apex of the stem, the very top. But more importantly, there are also poisonous mushrooms in the genus Gyromitra that are commonly referred to as false morels. They look more like little brains with a convoluted appearance and not really honeycombed. Their color can be more reddish-brown, which is also never seen in true morels. If you cut a true morel in half, the inside will be completely hollow, whereas a false morel cut in cross-section will have a stuffed or chambered appearance, meaning that there's mushroom tissue on the inside and not entirely hollow. False morels are generally considered to be poisonous. There are also many different species within the Gyromitra genus. Some of them can contain a toxin called gyromitrin that can be converted in the body to a chemical called monomethylhydrazine, which can cause neurological effects, including seizures. There may be other chemicals in the mushrooms as well that can contribute to toxicity. People who eat false morels can also experience gastrointestinal distress and liver injury. Now, there are people in certain cultures who do eat some species of false morels. There are traditional preparation methods used in various parts of the world, passed down over generations with techniques such as parboiling to make false morels safer to eat. Also, the different Gyromitra species around the world might differ in the types of chemicals or toxins that they contain. Just because a particular method of preparing false morels works in a certain geographic area doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe to do the same in another part of the world. Although we typically worry about acute poisoning with eating wild mushrooms, there's also some evidence to suggest that there may be long-term health effects associated with eating false morels. There's emerging research from Europe in recent years to suggest that there might be a link between eating certain species of false morels and developing amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or Lou Gehrig's disease, later in life. This is based on epidemiologic studies in the French Alps, and the connection is still not firmly established. But suffice it to say that unless you know exactly what you're doing and you accept a certain degree of risk to your health, it's probably best to avoid eating false morels entirely. Okay, so going back to the edible true morels in the genus Morchella, like this one, if you do choose to eat them, there are a few things to keep in mind about preparation. It is extremely important to make sure to cook them very, very thoroughly. And it's practically impossible to overcook most mushrooms. However, people can get extremely sick from eating morels that are not fully cooked. Symptoms can include nausea with profuse vomiting, diarrhea, and even internal bleeding in the gastrointestinal tract. Neurologic effects like dizziness and difficulty maintaining one's balance can occur as well. People have also developed shock with multi-system organ failure, and there have been some deaths associated with eating morels reported in the medical literature. The exact chemical or chemicals in morels responsible for making people sick are still unknown. In the spring of 2023, there was an outbreak of illness in Montana involving a sushi restaurant that served morel mushrooms that were marinated in a sauce but otherwise left raw or only partially cooked. 51 people got sick and 2 people died in this incident. These mushrooms were actually cultivated in China and imported fresh to the United States, not foraged locally in Montana. The same supplier also shipped morels to other food establishments in other states, but there were no reports of people getting sick elsewhere. Presumably, the other restaurants cooked the mushrooms well before serving them. You can find dried morel mushrooms for sale in fancy food stores, and some foragers also like to dry part of their harvest for long-term storage. As far as we know, drying does not destroy whatever toxin or toxins are found in morels. When working with reconstituted dried morels, it is just as important to cook them very thoroughly. In April 2023, around the same time as the restaurant outbreak in Montana, there was another person in Utah who got sick and died hours after eating dried morel mushrooms. He was on a camping trip and brought along some morels that he had foraged and dried himself the year before, in 2022. He added these mushrooms to an instant risotto mix that he cooked on a small portable camp stove. And it's thought that although the setup heated up the mushrooms, it was not sufficient to cook them thoroughly. Besides proper cooking, it takes a bit of work to clean and prepare morels. It's always a good idea to cut them in half before washing. Often they can be full of bugs, and as I've been holding this one, I've seen a lot of little maggots dropping out. I've even heard of a local person here in Georgia who once found a little salamander hanging out inside a morel. You'll probably want to give your morels a good long soak in water to get rid of all the grit and any critters. Even if you're not a mushroom forager or a foodie, if you're out hiking in the spring, keep an eye out for morel mushrooms. I've even spotted them in some parks in Atlanta, right in the middle of the city. They're really cool to look at, and it's fun to appreciate them just for their beauty. In general, never pick and eat wild mushrooms unless you are absolutely sure that they have been properly identified. As always, if you're concerned about possible exposure to a poisonous mushroom or other substance, call the Poison Help Hotline at 1-800-222-1222. I hope you have fun, enjoy nature, and stay safe.